Mary Bennett's hands trembled as she watched the man in the corner booth check his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. She knew who he was. Everyone in Chicago knew who Richard Alexander was. The way the other diners kept their eyes down, the way her manager Franco had gone pale when the reservation came through, the way the two massive men in dark suits flanked the entrance like human barricades, everything screamed danger. The kitchen was backed up. Tony had burned the risotto. The replacement would take another 8 minutes. 8 minutes that Mary didn't have. She could feel Richard's eyes burning into her back as she approached table 7 with a tray of drinks, her heart hammering against her ribs. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows of Bella Not seemed too bright, too cheerful for what was about to happen. The scent of garlic and basil that usually comforted her now made her stomach turn. "Where is my food?" The voice cut through the soft Italian music playing overhead. Deep. Cold. Laced with an authority that made grown men stutter. Mary turned slowly, forcing her server's smile into place. Richard Alexander sat alone in the booth, his tailored charcoal suit probably worth more than her entire year's tuition at the Art Institute. His dark hair was swept back perfectly, his jaw sharp enough to cut glass, and his eyes, those Arctic gray eyes, held absolutely no warmth. "Sir, I apologize for the delay. Your meal will be out shortly." Shortly. He leaned back, and the movement seemed predatory. "I ordered 30 minutes ago. Do you know who I am?" The restaurant had gone quiet. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Conversations died mid-sentence. "Yes, sir. I understand, and I'm very sorry." "You're sorry?" Richard's laugh was humorless. "I don't have time for sorry. I have a meeting across town in 40 minutes. I chose this establishment because I was told the service was exceptional. Clearly, I was misinformed." Mary felt heat rising to her cheeks. She'd been on her feet for 6 hours already. She'd missed her morning art class to cover for someone who called in sick. She had paint still stuck under her fingernails from working on her senior project until 3 a.m. And this food delay wasn't even her fault. "Sir, the kitchen is running behind schedule today. I've personally ensured your order is being prioritized." Behind schedule. Richard's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper that somehow carried across the entire restaurant. "Let me explain something to you, waitress. When I make time to eat at an establishment, I expect competence. What I'm experiencing right now is incompetence. Your incompetence." Something flickered in Mary's chest. A small flame of defiance. "I'll check on your order again." How difficult is it to bring food to a table? Is this your first day, or are you simply this useless at your job? Richard looked her up and down with such disdain that Mary felt 2 inches tall. They'll hire anyone these days. The flame grew hotter. Her manager Franco appeared at her elbow, practically sweating through his white shirt. "Mr. Alexander, please accept our deepest apologies. Your meal will be complimentary, of course, and I assure you." "I don't want it complimentary," Richard interrupted, not even looking at Franco. His eyes stayed locked on Mary. "I want service that doesn't waste my time." But apparently, that's too much to expect when you employ people who can barely manage to walk in a straight line. Mary's co-workers were watching. She could feel their pity, their relief that they weren't the ones dealing with him. She could see old Mrs. Patterson at table 3 shaking her head sympathetically. She could see the fear in Franco's eyes, silently begging her to just take it, to apologize again, to let it go. Richard Alexander was untouchable. Everyone knew it. He owned half the city's politicians, had judges in his pocket, and ran an empire built on fear and blood money. Men who crossed him disappeared. Businesses that disrespected him burned to the ground. You didn't talk back to Richard Alexander. You never talked back to Richard Alexander. "I understand your frustration, sir," Mary heard herself say, her voice steadier than she felt. "But insulting me won't make your food arrive any faster." The restaurant's collective breath caught. Richard's eyebrows rose slightly. It might have been the first time in years someone had challenged him. "Excuse me." His voice was silk wrapped around steel. Mary's pulse thundered in her ears. Common sense screamed at her to back down, to grovel, to run. But something else, something that had been building through 6 hours of rude customers, through weeks of juggling school and work, through months of being talked down to and overlooked, that something refused to bend. "You heard me," she said quietly. And then Richard Alexander smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a wolf that had just spotted particularly interesting prey. "What's your name?" he asked. Mary's name tag suddenly felt like a spotlight. "Mary." "Mary," Richard repeated, as if tasting the name. "Mary, do you have any idea what happens to people who disrespect me?" The two men by the door had straightened, their hands moving slightly beneath their jackets. Franco made a small sound that might have been a whimper. Mary knew she should be terrified. She was terrified. But she was also tired, and angry, and so incredibly done with being treated like she was nothing. Probably the same thing that happens to mafia bosses who can't handle a simple restaurant delay without throwing a tantrum, she said. And then, before her brain could stop her mouth, before common sense could reassert itself, before the reality of her own mortality could sink in, Mary Bennett looked directly into Richard Alexander's eyes and said something in absolutely perfect Italian that made his entire body go rigid. The words that came out of her mouth made the blood drain from Franco's face. Made the bodyguards reach for their guns. Made every single person in Bella not forget how to breathe. Because Mary hadn't just insulted him. She'd destroyed him. In his mother's native language. Looking straight into his eyes. Without even a tremor in her voice. And what Richard Alexander did next would change both of their lives forever. The silence that followed Mary's words felt like the moment before a bomb detonates. Richard Alexander hadn't moved. He sat perfectly still in the booth, his grey eyes locked on hers with an intensity that should have incinerated her on the spot. The muscle in his jaw twitched once, the only sign that he'd even heard what she'd said. What Mary had said, in flawless Italian, was, "Perhaps if you spent less time acting like a spoiled child and more time remembering your manners, people would actually respect you instead of just fearing you. There's a difference, though I doubt you're intelligent enough to understand it." She'd learned Italian from her grandmother, Nonna Lucia, who'd immigrated from Tuscany 50 years ago and refused to let her heritage die with her generation. Every Sunday for 22 years, Mary had sat in that small kitchen in Bridgeport, learning to roll pasta and roll her RS, absorbing both the language and the feast pride that came with it. Nonna Lucia had also taught her that respect was earned, not demanded. That backbone mattered more than money. That you never, ever let someone make you feel small, no matter who they were. Mary suspected her grandmother hadn't meant for that lesson to be applied to mafia bosses, but here they were. "Franco," Richard said quietly, still staring at Mary. "Leave us." "Mr. Alexander, I really think." "Leave." The single word carried enough menace to send Franco scurrying toward the kitchen, gesturing frantically for the other servers to follow. Within seconds, the dining room had cleared of staff, though the customers remained frozen in their seats, too terrified to move. Mary's legs wanted to run. Her survival instinct was screaming at her to apologize, to beg, to do anything to undo the last 30 seconds. But she'd already jumped off the cliff. There was no climbing back up. Richard stood slowly, unfolding from the booth with the grace of something predatory. He was tall, easily 6'2", and the way he moved suggested violence restrained by the thinnest veneer of civilization. He took a step toward her. Mary lifted her chin, even as her heart tried to beat its way out of her chest. "You speak Italian," Richard said. "It wasn't a question. My grandmother taught me. And she taught you to be suicidal as well. She taught me not to let bullies push me around." Something flickered across Richard's face, surprise, maybe, or something darker. "You think I'm a bully? I think you're a man who's used to getting his way and doesn't know how to handle it when someone says no." The corner of his mouth twitched. "People don't say no to me, Mary." "Well, I just did. In 2 languages." He studied her with an expression she couldn't read. Up close, she could see the faint scar along his jawline, the expensive cologne that smelled like cedar and smoke, the absolute absence of mercy in those grey eyes. "Do you know what I could do to you?" he asked softly. "I imagine quite a lot. You have guns. I have student debt and a portfolio of unfinished paintings. The power dynamic is pretty clear. And yet you're still talking. I have a condition. It's called self-preservation failure. Very serious. Doctors say there's no cure." Was she actually making jokes? Had fear broken her brain? Richard stared at her for a long moment, and Mary prepared herself for whatever came next. She thought about her mother, who would cry at her funeral. Her roommate Jen, who would probably say, "I told you that mouth would get you killed." Her senior art project, which would remain forever unfinished in the studio. She thought about Nonna Lucia, who'd passed away last year, and wondered if her grandmother would be proud or horrified. Probably both. "What's your last name?" Richard asked. "Bennett. Mary Bennett." He said it slowly, like he was committing it to memory. "For a hit list, probably. You're an art student." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "How did you know?" He gestured to her hands. "Paint under your fingernails. Charcoal smudge on your wrist. The way you looked at the Caravaggio reproduction on the wall when you walked in, like you were analyzing the brushwork instead of just seeing a picture." Mary glanced at the painting in question, surprised. "You know Caravaggio?" "My mother was an art dealer in Milan. Before she married my father." The revelation hung between them, this tiny piece of humanity from a man who supposedly had none. "Was?" Mary asked softly. "She died when I was 12. "I'm sorry." Richard's expression hardened again, like he regretted sharing even that small detail. "Don't apologize for things that aren't your fault. It's a sign of weakness. Or empathy. In my world, those are the same thing." Mary wanted to argue, but something in his voice made her pause. There was a story there, buried under layers of ice and violence. A reason why this dangerous man sat alone in restaurants, why he demanded perfection, why he'd noticed details about her that most people would miss. "Your food is ready, Mr. Alexander." Franco's voice came from the kitchen doorway, trembling. Should I bring it out?" Richard didn't break eye contact with Mary. "No. I've lost my appetite." He reached into his jacket. Mary flinched involuntarily, and pulled out a black leather wallet. He extracted several $100 bills and placed them on the table. "For the inconvenience," he said. Then he did something that made Mary's blood run cold. He smiled. A real smile this time, slow and dangerous and absolutely terrifying in its beauty. "You're interesting, Mary Bennett. That's unfortunate for you." "Why?" "Because I don't forget interesting things." He walked past her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell that cedar and smoke cologne. Close enough that she could see the exact moment his expression shifted back into the cold mask he showed the world. At the door, flanked by his bodyguards, he paused. "One more thing," he called back. "Your Italian is very good. But your Tuscan accent is showing. It's charming." And then Richard Alexander walked out of Bellinot, leaving Mary standing in the middle of the restaurant, shaking like a leaf, with absolutely no idea whether she'd just survived an encounter with Chicago's most dangerous man, or started something far more dangerous than a simple confrontation. Franco rushed over the moment the black SUV pulled away from the curb. His face was the color of spoiled milk. "Mary, what have you done? Do you have any idea what you've just done?" "I insulted a mafia boss in Italian." Mary's voice came out higher than intended. The adrenaline was starting to wear off, and in its place came the shaking realization of what she'd actually said. To whom she'd said it. "He could have killed you. Right here. In my restaurant." Franco was pacing now, running his hands through his thinning hair. "He could have, Mary. People who disrespect Richard Alexander don't just get fired. They disappear." "I know." Mary sank into the nearest chair, her legs finally giving out. "I know, Franco. He wouldn't stop. He was so cruel, and I snapped." Her co-worker Sophia emerged from the kitchen, her dark eyes wide. "That was the most insane thing I've ever seen. You literally told a mafia boss he was stupid." In Italian. She said it with a mixture of horror and admiration. "I didn't say he was stupid. I said he probably wasn't intelligent enough to understand the difference between fear and respect." "Oh, well, that's much better," Sophia said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Totally not insulting at all. The other customers were starting to move again, the spell of terror broken. Mrs. Patterson caught Mary's eye and gave her a small nod, respect from the elderly Italian woman who'd been coming to Bellinot for 30 years. Mary's phone buzzed in her apron pocket. 3 texts from Jen. "Just saw on the news that Richard Alexander was at Bellinot. Please tell me you didn't serve him." "Mary." Mary, answer your phone. Mary typed back, I'm alive. Mostly. We'll explain later. She looked down at her hands. They were still shaking. Paint-stained fingers that were better suited to holding brushes than standing up to gangsters. She'd come to Chicago 4 years ago with a scholarship and a dream of becoming a real artist, of having her work in galleries, of making her mother proud and honoring Nonna Lucia's memory. She'd never imagined she'd end up telling a mafia boss he was a spoiled child. What do I do? She asked Franco quietly. Her manager had stopped pacing. He looked older suddenly, worn down by decades in a city where men like Richard Alexander made the rules. You pray, Franco said finally. You pray that he found you amusing enough to forget. And Mary? Yes. Start looking for a new job. I can't afford to have you here if he decides to come back. I have a family. I have a business. I'm sorry, but I understand. And she did. Franco was a good man, but he was also a practical one. You didn't risk everything for a part-time waitress with a death wish. Mary untied her apron with numb fingers, grabbed her bag from the staff room, and walked out into the Chicago afternoon. The sun was still shining. Cars still honked on the street. A vendor was still selling flowers on the corner. The world kept turning, indifferent to the fact that Mary Bennett had just committed what might amount to suicide by insult. She pulled out her phone and called her mother. Hi, Mom. I'm fine. Everything's fine. But hypothetically, if someone did something really, really stupid and might need to leave town for a while, how would you feel about a visit? Mary didn't go home that night. She went to the one place that had always made sense when the world didn't, her studio at the Art Institute. The building was nearly empty at 7 p.m., just a few dedicated students grinding away on their thesis projects. Her space was in the corner of the 3rd floor, a cramped area she'd personalized with postcards of Italian Renaissance paintings and photos of Nonna Lucia. Her senior project stared back at her from the easel. A series of portraits exploring the concept of masks, the faces people showed the world versus who they really were. She'd been stuck on it for weeks, unable to capture the right emotion in the eyes. Now, with shaking hands still smelling faintly of restaurant garlic, she picked up a brush. And she painted Richard Alexander. She didn't mean to. She'd intended to work on her existing pieces, to lose herself in color and form until her heart stopped racing. But her hand had other ideas. Within an hour, his face emerged on the canvas, those Arctic gray eyes, that sharp jaw, that dangerous smile. But she painted something else too. Something she'd seen for just a moment when he'd mentioned his mother. A flash of humanity beneath the monster. Pain wrapped in power. Loneliness disguised as strength. She was so absorbed in the work that she didn't hear the footsteps until they were right behind her. You made my nose slightly crooked. I broke it when I was 16. Mary spun around, paintbrush clattering to the floor. Richard Alexander stood in her studio, somehow looking even more dangerous in the fluorescent lighting than he had in the restaurant. He'd removed his suit jacket, and his white shirt was rolled up at the sleeves, revealing forearms that spoke of violence barely contained. His 2 bodyguards flanked the doorway. How did you? This is a secure building. There's no such thing as a secure building, Mary. Only buildings I haven't decided to enter yet. He moved closer to the easel, studying her work with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Is this how you see me? I was just practicing. It doesn't mean anything. Doesn't it? He tilted his head, and the movement reminded her of a predator calculating angles. You painted my eyes wrong. Wrong. They're not that cold. Usually. The corner of his mouth quirked. Only when dealing with incompetent waitresses. Was he joking? Mary couldn't tell if she should laugh or run. Mr. Alexander, why are you here? If you're going to kill me, could we do it outside? My roommate uses this studio too, and she's got a gallery showing next month. Blood would really ruin her ceramics. Still making jokes. Richard picked up one of her other paintings, a portrait of her grandmother. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most foolish. Definitely the second one. He studied Nonna Lucia's painted face. She looks like she was formidable. She was. She once chased a burglar out of her house with a wooden spoon and a string of Italian curses that made grown men cry. I would have liked to meet her. The softness in his voice caught Mary off guard. This close, she could see he had flecks of blue in those grey eyes. Could see the faint shadows beneath them that spoke of sleepless nights. Could see that he was younger than she'd initially thought, maybe early 30s, though he carried himself with the weariness of someone much older. "Why are you here?" she asked again, quieter this time. Richard set down the painting and turned to face her fully. "Because you did something today that no one has done in 10 years. Insulted you. Made me feel something other than anger or indifference." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. "I don't understand," Mary whispered. "Neither do I." He took a step closer. "I should have had you dealt with. That's what my people expected. That's what I've done to others for lesser disrespect." "Why didn't you?" "Because when you looked at me and spoke in my mother's language." He stopped, something flickering across his face. "My mother used to say that you can know a person's soul by whether they choose cruelty or courage when they are afraid. You were terrified today. I could see it. But you chose courage anyway." "I chose stupidity." "Perhaps." His lips curved into that dangerous smile. "But it was magnificent stupidity." Mary's pulse hammered in her throat. She should be afraid, she was afraid, but something else was mixing with the fear. Something warm and reckless that made her forget why getting closer to this man was the worst idea imaginable. "Mr. Alexander." "Richard. If you're going to paint my portrait, you should probably use my first name." "Richard, then. I still don't understand why you're here." He reached into his pocket, and Mary's breath caught, but he pulled out a business card, not a weapon. Heavy cardstock, expensive. Just a phone number embossed in black. "I have a proposition for you." "I'm not interested in propositions from mafia bosses." "Not that kind of proposition." His eyes glinted with amusement. "Though I appreciate your immediate assumption that I'm propositioning you. Does that happen often?" Mary felt heat rise to her cheeks. "You know what I meant." "I do. And my offer is legitimate." He gestured to her paintings. "You're talented. Very talented. And you need money. Art students always need money, and you just lost your job." "How did you?" "I know everything that happens in my city, Mary. Franco called his wife 20 minutes after you left. She told her sister. Her sister's husband works for me. Information travels." The casual demonstration of his reach should have terrified her. Instead, it just made her tired. "So what's your offer? You want me to paint you? Decorate your mob headquarters with tasteful portraits of your victims?" "No." Richard moved to her window, looking out over the Chicago skyline. The city lights reflected in his eyes, making him look almost vulnerable. "I want you to teach me." "Teach you what?" "Italian. Art. Whatever my mother would have taught me if she'd lived long enough." Mary stared at him. "You're joking." "I never joke about my mother." "You want me, the woman who insulted you in front of an entire restaurant, to give you Italian lessons?" "And art lessons?" "Yes." He turned back to her, and his expression was utterly serious. "I'll pay you $10,000 a week. Cash. For 4 hours of your time every evening." The number hit Mary like a physical blow. That's insane." "That's what your expertise is worth to me." "I'm a student. I'm not an expert in anything." "You're an expert in something I've lost." His voice dropped lower, and Mary heard genuine emotion beneath the words. "You're an expert in the parts of my heritage my mother died before she could give me. My father was American, crude, violent. He hated anything that reminded him of her. After she died, he forbid Italian in the house, sold all her art, erased every trace of her except." He stopped abruptly, as if he'd revealed too much. "Except what?" Mary asked softly. Richard's jaw tightened. "Except me. I have her eyes." He used to say it was like she was still watching him, judging him. That's why again, he cut himself off. "That's not relevant." But it was relevant. Mary could see it in the tension in his shoulders, the carefully controlled expression. This wasn't about art lessons or language. This was about something deeper. Something that had shaped him into the dangerous man standing in her studio. "What happens if I say no?" she asked. "Nothing. You walk away. Find another job. Finish your degree. Live your life. You won't retaliate. No. And if I say yes? Then starting tomorrow, you spend 4 hours every evening teaching me everything your grandmother taught you. You'll be compensated, protected, and you'll have access to my private art collection, pieces worth millions that almost no one has seen. Mary's artist heart jumped at that last part. But her rational brain was screaming warnings. This is crazy. You're crazy. I'm crazy for even considering this. Probably. You're a criminal. Definitely. People must want you dead. Several someones, yes. But my security is excellent. He nodded toward the bodyguards. You'll be perfectly safe. Safe. Right. Because nothing says safety like spending time with Chicago's most notorious mafia boss. Is that a yes? Mary looked at the canvas where his portrait stared back at her. She thought about her student loans, about the scholarships that barely covered tuition, about eating ramen for dinner 5 nights a week. She thought about her mother working double shifts at the hospital. About the gallery show she'd been invited to participate in, if she could afford the framing costs. She thought about Nonna Lucia, who'd always said that life's greatest adventures came from the decisions that scared you most. If I do this, Mary said slowly, we have rules. Clear boundaries. This is a professional arrangement. Teacher and student. Nothing else. Agreed. And you don't get to threaten me, insult me, or do whatever it is you do to people who annoy you. I'll do my best. Richard. Fine. I agree. Mary took a deep breath. This was insane. This was the worst decision she'd ever make. This was going to end badly, she could feel it in her bones. Okay, she heard herself say. I'll do it. Richard's smile was small but genuine, and it transformed his entire face. For just a moment, she could see what he might have been if violence hadn't shaped him. Who he might have become if his mother had lived. Tomorrow evening. 7 o'clock. He handed her the card. My driver will collect you from your apartment. How do you know where I? Never mind. Information travels. Exactly. He moved toward the door, then paused. Mary. Yes. Thank you. The words sounded rusty, like he didn't use them often. Like maybe he'd forgotten how. And then Richard Alexander left her studio, taking his bodyguards and his dangerous smile and his mysterious offer with him. Mary stood alone among her paintings, holding a business card that probably represented either the best opportunity of her life or the beginning of her end, and wondered what the hell she'd just agreed to. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Wear something comfortable tomorrow. We'll start with the basics. And Mary? That portrait is good. But you made me look too human. I'm not sure I deserve that. She looked at the painting, at the eyes she'd captured with such care, at the humanity she'd seen beneath the monster. And she wondered if maybe, just maybe, Richard Alexander was more than the sum of his crimes. Or if that thought would be the thing that finally got her killed. The black Mercedes that picked Mary up the next evening was worth more than her childhood home. The driver, a stoic man named Vincent who looked like he could bend steel with his bare hands, didn't speak during the 20-minute drive through Chicago's exclusive Gold Coast neighborhood. Mary watched the city transform outside her window. Her neighborhood of cramped apartments and corner stores gave way to tree-lined streets and mansions that looked like they belonged in European magazines. Old money. Power. A world she'd only ever seen from the outside. The car turned through iron gates that opened automatically, gliding up a circular driveway to a limestone mansion that made Mary's breath catch. It was beautiful in a severe way, all clean lines and tall windows, with ivy climbing one side like nature trying to soften something inherently hard. Miss Bennet, Vincent said, his first words since picking her up. Mr. Alexander is waiting in the library. A different bodyguard, this one introduced as James, led her through a foyer with marble floors and a chandelier that cost more than her entire education. The interior was exactly what she'd expected, expensive, immaculate, and somehow cold despite the obvious luxury. Modern art on the walls, furniture that looked sculptural rather than comfortable, everything in shades of grey and black and white. No family photos. No personal touches. Nothing that suggested anyone actually lived here. The library was different. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined 3 walls, filled with books that actually looked read rather than decorative. A massive window overlooked a private garden. And the art. Mary stopped breathing when she saw the art. A Modigliani portrait hung above the fireplace. What looked like an early Picasso sketch was framed on the adjacent wall. And in the corner, lit perfectly, was a small painting she recognized from her art history textbooks. "Is that a Caravaggio?" she whispered. "The incredulity of St. Thomas. My mother's favorite." Richard's voice came from behind her. She said she loved it because it showed that even faith requires proof sometimes. That doubt isn't the opposite of belief, it's part of it. Mary turned. He changed from his suit into dark jeans and a black sweater that somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. More human. More real. "This must be worth, I can't even imagine what this is worth. 60 million. Give or take." He said it like someone else might mention the weather. "But its value to me has nothing to do with money." He moved to a table where he'd set out supplies, notebooks, pens, an Italian grammar book that looked well worn, and a bottle of wine with 2 glasses. "I thought we'd start with conversation," Richard said. "My Italian is rusty. My mother died 20 years ago, and I haven't spoken it since except for business dealings with associates in Sicily." "You do remember some then?" "Phrases. Curses. Things my father couldn't beat out of me." He said it casually, but Mary heard the weight behind the words. She sat across from him, accepting the glass of wine he poured. "Tell me something you remember." In Italian. Richard was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass. Then he spoke, his accent rough but the words clear. "You're stronger than you think, my treasure. Never let them make you small," Mary translated softly. "Your mother said that to you. Every night before bed. Even when my father raged downstairs, even when," he stopped, took a drink of wine. "Especially then." Mary felt something crack open in her chest. This wasn't the cold Mafia boss from the restaurant. This was someone else entirely. Someone who'd been a scared child once, clinging to his mother's words like a lifeline. "She sounds like she was remarkable," Mary said. "She was. And she deserved better than my father. Better than the life he trapped her in." "Is he dead?" 10 years now." Richard's expression hardened. "I'd say rest in peace, but I'd be lying." The darkness in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, Mary understood. She'd seen enough of the world to know that not all parents deserved their children's love. That sometimes survival meant learning to live with the ghosts of people who'd hurt you. "Okay," she said, shifting into teacher mode because the emotion in the room was becoming too heavy, too intimate. "Let's start with basics. I want you to tell me about your day. In Italian. Don't worry about perfect grammar. Just try." Richard raised an eyebrow. "My day involves things you probably don't want to hear about." "Then lie. Tell me about an imaginary day where you're not a terrifying crime lord." "Terrifying?" His lips curved. "You weren't terrified yesterday when you called me stupid." "I called you potentially unintelligent. There's a nuance." "Ah yes. Much better." But he started speaking, haltingly at first, then with growing confidence. His Italian was better than he'd claimed, rough around the edges, but the foundation was solid. His mother had taught him well in those 12 years. Mary corrected his grammar gently, encouraged him when he struggled for words, and tried to ignore how the lamplight caught in his eyes or how his whole face changed when he smiled at getting something right. They worked for an hour before Mary suggested they move to art. "Tell me about your collection," she said, standing to examine the Picasso sketch more closely. "How did you acquire all this?" "Some I inherited from my mother. Some I've acquired over the years." "Legally?" Richard's silence was answer enough. "Right. Crime lord." Forgot for a second. Mary turned to face him. "Do you feel guilty about it? Stealing art?" "I don't steal it personally. I have people for that." He stood, moving to join her at the sketch. "And no. Not when I know I'll appreciate it more than some banker who bought it as an investment. Art should be loved, not locked in a vault to accrue value." That's surprisingly philosophical for a criminal. "I'm a man of contradictions." He was close now, close enough that she could smell that cedar and smoke cologne again. "Surely you've noticed." Mary's pulse quickened. I've noticed you're very good at deflecting personal questions. And you're very good at asking them. It's part of teaching. I need to understand how you think to know how you learn. Is that the only reason you want to understand how I think? The question hung between them, charged with something Mary didn't want to name. She stepped back, creating distance, reminding herself that this was professional. That Richard Alexander was dangerous. That getting involved with him beyond their arrangement would be catastrophic. Yes, she lied. That's the only reason. Richard smiled like he could see right through her. You're a terrible liar, Mary Bennet. Before she could respond, the library door opened. A woman entered, tall, blonde, beautiful in a sharp-edged way, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than Mary's car. Her eyes, cold and assessing, swept over Mary with barely concealed disdain. Richard, darling, I didn't know you had company. Her voice dripped honey-laced with arsenic. Natalie. Richard's tone cooled several degrees. I thought you were in New York. I came back early. I missed you. Natalie crossed the room, her heels clicking on the hardwood, and kissed Richard's cheek with possessive familiarity. Are you going to introduce me to your guest? Mary Bennet. She's teaching me Italian and art history. Richard extracted himself from Natalie's grasp smoothly. Mary, this is Natalie Stark. An associate. Associate. Natalie laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. Is that what we're calling it now? Richard, really? You don't need to be coy. Mary felt something ugly twist in her stomach. Jealousy. Which was absurd. She had no claim on Richard, no right to feel anything about whoever this woman was to him. It's nice to meet you, Mary said, gathering her things. I should go. We can continue tomorrow. No. Richard's hand caught her wrist, gentle but firm. We're not finished. Natalie was just leaving. Actually, I wanted to discuss the situation with the Calabrese family. It's urgent. Natalie's eyes flicked to Mary, dismissive. Unless you want to discuss business in front of the help. The word help landed like a slap. Richard's expression went from cool to glacial. Natalie. Leave. Now. But. Now. Something in his voice made even Natalie reconsider. She smoothed her dress, managed a tight smile. Of course. We'll talk later, darling. When you're less distracted. She swept out, and the temperature in the room seemed to rise 10 degrees. I apologize for that, Richard said quietly. Natalie forgets her place sometimes. What is her place? Mary asked, then immediately wished she hadn't. Sorry. Not my business. She works for me. Handles certain financial operations. We had a brief involvement years ago that she occasionally tries to resurrect. He met Mary's eyes. I'm not interested in resurrections. You don't owe me explanations about your personal life. Don't I? He was still holding her wrist, his thumb resting against her pulse point. Could he feel how fast her heart was racing? You're in my home. In my life, however temporarily. You should know where you stand. I'm your teacher. That's where I stand. Is it? Richard. I think about you, he said suddenly. Since yesterday. The way you looked at me without fear, or with fear but defiance stronger than the fear. The way you spoke my mother's language like it was yours too. I can't stop thinking about it. Mary's breath caught. That's not. We agreed this was professional. I know. And I'll honor that agreement. But I won't lie to you, Mary. I'm many things, most of them terrible, but I'm not a liar. Not with you. The honesty in his voice undid something in her. She should pull away. Should remind him and herself that this couldn't happen. That he was a criminal and she was a student and nothing good could come from whatever was building between them. Instead, she heard herself ask, "What are you afraid of, Richard?" He blinked, clearly not expecting the question. What? Everyone's afraid of something. What scares you? For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, becoming my father. Losing the last pieces of my mother I have left. And now, he released her wrist, stepped back. Dragging someone innocent into my world and watching it destroy them. I'm not that innocent. And I'm tougher than I look. I know. That's what terrifies me. They stood there, the weight of unspoken things pressing down on them both. Mary knew she should leave. Should walk out the door, quit this arrangement, go back to her safe, simple life. But when Richard asked, "Same time tomorrow," she found herself nodding. Same time. Over the next 2 weeks, Mary fell into a rhythm that felt increasingly dangerous and increasingly right. 4 hours every evening in Richard's library, teaching him the language his mother had loved, discussing art and aesthetics and beauty. Watching him slowly open up, revealing pieces of himself he kept hidden from everyone else. He told her about his mother's gallery in Milan, how she'd discovered young artists and championed them before anyone else saw their talent. How his father had been charming at first, American money and confidence, but that charm had curdled into cruelty behind closed doors. How Richard had found his mother's body when he was 12. How his father had looked at him with those same grey eyes and said, "Don't cry. Tears are for the weak." How he'd built an empire on the ashes of his father's organization, taking everything the old man had created and making it his own. How he told himself he was different, better, but sometimes wondered if he was just a more sophisticated version of the same monster. Mary told him about Nonna Lucia, about growing up watching her mother work herself to exhaustion, about the scholarship that had saved her. About her dreams of having her work in real galleries, of making art that mattered. About feeling invisible most of her life until she'd opened her mouth in that restaurant and been seen, really seen, for the first time. They didn't talk about the attraction crackling between them. They didn't acknowledge the way his hand would brush hers when passing books, or how her breath would catch when he stood too close, or how the lessons kept running longer than 4 hours because neither wanted them to end. They didn't talk about it, but it was there. Growing. Undeniable. On the 14th night, Richard showed her the room. "My mother's things," he said, opening a door off the library. "Everything my father tried to destroy. I saved what I could." Inside was a treasure trove. Paintings, sketches, photographs of a beautiful dark-haired woman with Richard's eyes. Journals in Italian. Silk scarves and jewelry and a dress that still smelled faintly of perfume 20 years later. "Richard," Mary whispered, touching a watercolor of the Italian countryside. "This is extraordinary. I've never shown anyone this room. Not in 10 years. She turned to him. "Why show me?" "Because you understand. Because when you talk about your grandmother, I hear the same love I felt for my mother. Because," he moved closer, and Mary's back was against the wall, his hands bracing on either side of her. "Because I trust you. God help me, I trust you. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're brave and talented and kind. I know you see me as more than what I am. I know that when you're here, this house feels less like a mausoleum and more like a home. Richard, we can't." "I know." But he didn't move away. "Tell me to stop, Mary. Tell me this is just a job, that you feel nothing, and I'll step back. I'll honor our agreement. But if you can't say that." Mary couldn't say it. The words wouldn't come because they'd be a lie, and hadn't he said he wouldn't lie to her? Didn't she owe him the same honesty? "I can't say that," she whispered. Richard's eyes darkened. "Mary." Her phone rang, shrill in the quiet room. She jumped, and the moment shattered. It was Jen. Mary answered, grateful for the interruption and furious about it in equal measure. "Mary, where are you? Are you safe?" "I'm fine. I'm at work." "Why?" "There was a shooting at Bella Not tonight. 2 men walked in asking about you. Franco told them you didn't work there anymore, and they shot up the restaurant. Nobody was killed, but Mary, they were looking for you." The blood drained from Mary's face. Richard's expression went from soft to lethal in an instant. "What happened?" he demanded. Mary's hands shook as she lowered the phone. "Someone's looking for me. They shot up the restaurant." Richard was already moving, pulling out his phone, barking orders. "Vincent. Get the car. James, sweep the perimeter. I want to know who the fuck is targeting her and I want to know now." He turned back to Mary, and she saw the monster everyone else feared. Cold. Furious. Dangerous. "You're staying here tonight," he said. "It's not a request." "Richard, I can't. Someone just tried to send you a message written in bullets, Mary. You're staying. I'll keep you safe." "Why would anyone target me?" His jaw clenched. Because they've seen you coming here. Because targeting you is a way to get to me. Because I was stupid enough to let you into my life and now you're in danger. This isn't your fault. It's absolutely my fault. He cupped her face, and his hands were trembling. I knew this could happen. I knew it, and I was selfish enough to want you here anyway. But I swear to you, Mary, I will end anyone who tries to hurt you. Do you understand? Anyone. And looking into his eyes, seeing the lethal promise there, Mary finally understood what it meant to be in Richard Alexander's world. It meant that falling for him might save her. Or it might destroy her. And she was no longer sure which terrified her more. Richard's guest room was larger than Mary's entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the garden, now dark except for security lights that cast everything in harsh white relief. A king-sized bed dominated the space, covered in sheets that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Mary sat on the edge of it, still wearing her jeans and sweater, unable to process what had just happened. Someone had shot up Bellinot. Looking for her. Because of Richard. A soft knock at the door made her jump. It's me, Richard's voice came through. May I come in? Yes. He entered carrying 2 glasses of whiskey. His expression was controlled, but she could see the rage simmering beneath the surface. He handed her a glass and sat beside her, careful to maintain distance. Franco and everyone at the restaurant are safe, he said. I've sent people to repair the damage and compensate him for lost business. The shooters were hired guns, local thugs. My people are tracking down who paid them. How can you be so calm? Mary's voice shook. People could have died because of me. Not because of you. Because of me. He took a long drink. This is my world, Mary. This is what I tried to warn you about. You think this is your fault. I know it is. Someone saw you coming to my house. They're using you to send a message or draw me out. It's what I would do if I wanted to hurt me. The casual way he said it, the strategic analysis of his own vulnerability, made Mary's chest ache. This was how he survived. By thinking 3 moves ahead, by assuming everyone was an enemy, by never letting anyone close enough to be used against him. Except he'd let her close. And now she was a target. I should leave, she said quietly. Go home. Stay away from you until this blows over. No. The word was steel. You're safer here than anywhere else. My security is. Richard, I can't hide in your house forever. You can hide here until I find who's responsible and eliminate the threat. Eliminate. Mary looked at him. You mean kill? Yes. The honesty shouldn't have surprised her, but it still landed like a blow. This was who he was. What he did. She'd been playing at understanding, but this was real. Blood real. Death real. I don't know if I can be okay with that, she whispered. I'm not asking you to be okay with it. I'm asking you to let me keep you alive. Before she could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression went lethal. What? Mary asked. They found one of the shooters. His talking. Richard stood, every line of his body radiating violence. Stay here. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except me or Vincent. Richard. But he was already gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. Mary sat alone with her whiskey, listening to the old house settle around her. She should be terrified. She'd be calling the police, her mother, anyone who existed in the normal world she'd left behind when she'd agreed to teach a Mafia boss Italian. Instead, she found herself thinking about the way Richard had looked at her in his mother's room. The vulnerability in his eyes when he'd said he trusted her. The trembling in his hands when he'd cupped her face. She was falling for him. God help her, she was falling for a man who solved problems with bullets and considered murder a reasonable business strategy. Nonna Lucia would have either loved him or tried to hit him with a wooden spoon. Possibly both. An hour passed. Then 2. Mary paced the room, checked her phone obsessively, resisted the urge to go find Richard. Finally, she heard footsteps in the hallway. The door opened without a knock. Richard stood there, and something in his expression made Mary's blood run cold. What happened? She asked. The shooter talked. Gave up who hired him. Richard's voice was carefully neutral, which was somehow worse than anger. It was Natalie. What? Natalie Stark. My associate. He said the word with venom. She hired those men to shoot up the restaurant. Not to kill anyone, just to scare you. To make you leave. Mary's mind reeled. But why would she? Because she's been trying to get back into my bed for 3 years, and she sees you as competition. Because she's petty and jealous and stupid enough to think terrorizing you would make you disappear from my life. Richard's hands clenched into fists. She's being dealt with as we speak. Dealt with? You mean? Not killed. I don't kill people for being stupid, just dangerous. But she's finished in Chicago. Finished in any city where my reach extends. She'll be lucky if she can get a job washing dishes in Alaska. The cold efficiency of it was staggering. One phone call and he'd erased someone from existence, socially, professionally, completely. Richard, There's more. He moved into the room, and Mary saw he was carrying a box. An old wooden box with Italian words carved into the lid. When my people searched Natalie's office for evidence, they found this. She'd stolen it from my mother's room months ago. I didn't even know it was missing. He set the box on the bed between them. His hands were shaking. What is it? Mary asked softly. My mother's letters. From before she married my father. I've never read them, I didn't know they existed. He opened the lid, revealing stacks of envelopes tied with faded ribbon. They're in Italian. I need you to read them to me. The vulnerability in his request broke something open in Mary's chest. She picked up the first letter carefully, noting the date. 35 years ago. The paper was yellowed, the ink still clear. She began to read aloud, translating as she went. The letter was from Richard's mother to a friend, talking about her gallery, her love of art, her dreams. Ordinary things made extraordinary by the passion in every word. Mary read 3 more, painting a picture of a vibrant young woman who'd loved beauty and believed in the power of art to change lives. Then Mary opened the 5th letter and froze. What? Richard asked. What's wrong? Richard, this letter, it's addressed to Lucia Moetti. Whose? His eyes widened. Your grandmother. Yes. Mary's hands trembled as she read. Your mother and my grandmother knew each other. They were friends. That's impossible. Listen. Mary read aloud, her voice shaking. Dearest Lucia, I miss you terribly. Chicago feels cold compared to our summers in Tuscany. But I've met someone, an American businessman who makes me feel alive again after Papa's death. I know you worry about me rushing into things, but you would like him. He's ambitious, passionate. He says he'll build me a gallery here, that will bring Italian art to America together. His name is James Alexander. I think I'm falling in love. The letter went on, but Mary couldn't continue. She looked at Richard, seeing her own shock reflected in his face. They were friends, she whispered. My grandmother and your mother were friends. Richard took the letter with shaking hands, staring at the Italian words as if he could will them to make sense. Did your grandmother ever mention? No. Never. She talked about Tuscany sometimes, about friends she'd left behind, but never a name. Mary's mind was racing. Richard, what if our meeting wasn't coincidence? What do you mean? I got the job at Bella not 3 months ago. It's an Italian restaurant in your territory. What if? She couldn't finish the thought. It was too big, too impossible. Richard stood abruptly, pulling out his phone. Vincent. I need everything you can find on Lucia Moetti. Death records, immigration records, everything. Yes, now. He paced while they waited, energy radiating off him like electricity. Mary read more letters, each one deepening the picture of friendship between 2 young Italian women who'd loved art and dreamed big. Then she found the letter that changed everything. Lucia, I'm frightened. James isn't who I thought he was. The business he talked about, it's not legitimate. I've seen things, heard things. There are men with guns. Money that appears from nowhere. I wanted to leave, but I'm pregnant. He says if I try to take the baby, he'll find me wherever I go. He'll take our child and I'll never see him again. Lucia, what do I do? You got out, escaped to America before things got dark. How do I save my son from his father's world? Mary's voice broke on the last words. She looked up to find Richard standing frozen, his face drained of color. She wanted to leave, he said hoarsely. She wanted to save me from him. Richard. Keep reading. Mary found the next letter, dated 2 months later. Thank you for the money, dearest friend. I have everything ready. In 3 days, when James is in New York, I'll take Richard and run. You've arranged everything, the apartment in Seattle, the new identity. I'll paint again, teach my son to love beauty instead of violence. He'll grow up knowing his mother chose freedom over fear. I'll call you when we're safe. Thank you, Lucia. You're saving both our lives. There were no more letters after that. Because 3 days before she would have run, Richard's mother had died. It wasn't an accident, Richard said quietly. My father always said it was an accident. Pills and alcohol, a tragic mistake. But it wasn't. He found out about her plan. You don't know that. I do. He turned to face her, and Mary had never seen such raw pain in anyone's eyes. I found her, Mary. I was 12 years old, and I found my mother dead in her bedroom. There was a glass of wine on her nightstand. My father was standing in the doorway. He looked at me and said, she made her choice. Then he made me help him stage it to look like an accident. Oh God. Richard. Your grandmother was trying to save my mother. They had an escape plan. And my father, his voice cracked. He killed her rather than let her go. Mary went to him without thinking, wrapping her arms around him as he shattered. This man who never showed weakness, who ruled through fear, who'd built walls so high nothing could touch him, he broke in her arms. I'm sorry, she whispered, holding him as he trembled. I'm so sorry. She was going to take me away from him. We were going to be free. The words came out ragged. And he took that from us. He took her from us. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in grief and revelation. When Richard finally pulled back, his eyes were red but clear. Your grandmother tried to save my mother, he said. And now you're here. In my life. Teaching me everything my mother would have taught me. That can't be coincidence. I don't know what it is, Mary admitted. Yes, you do. He cupped her face, thumbs tracing her cheekbones. You were meant to find me. To give me back the pieces my father stole. Your grandmother couldn't save my mother, but you. I'm not here to save you, Richard. Aren't you? His smile was sad and beautiful. You already have. You just don't know it yet. He kissed her then, soft and desperate and inevitable. Mary knew she should stop this, should remember all the reasons this was impossible. But his lips were on hers and his hands were in her hair, and nothing in her life had ever felt this right. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Richard pressed his forehead to hers. Stay, he whispered. Not just tonight. Stay with me. Let me protect you. Let me, he stopped, searching for words. Let me be someone worth saving. You already are, Mary said. And in that moment, surrounded by letters from the dead and secrets from the past, Mary Bennett made a choice that would change everything. She chose Richard Alexander. She chose danger over safety, passion over sense, love over fear. She chose him, knowing it might destroy her. And prayed that this time, unlike their mother's story, theirs would end differently. For 3 days, Mary lived in Richard's world. She stayed in his home, slept in his bed, let him hold her like she was something precious instead of a complication that could get them both killed. They read his mother's letters together, spoke Italian in the quiet hours before dawn, and pretended that the outside world didn't exist. On the 4th morning, reality crashed through the door. Mary woke to shouting downstairs. Richard was already gone from bed, and when she threw on his shirt and ran to find him, she discovered his library full of dangerous-looking men in expensive suits. Calabrese's family knows about the girl, one of them was saying. They're planning something. Using her to draw you out. Then we move her somewhere safer, Richard said, his voice cold and commanding. The version of him that ruled an empire. Or we remove the vulnerability entirely. This from an older man with silver hair and dead eyes. One girl isn't worth a war, Richard. You know that. Mary's blood turned to ice. Watch your next words very carefully, Marcus, Richard said softly, dangerously. The silver-haired man, Marcus, shrugged. I'm saying what everyone's thinking. She's a civilian. A student. She doesn't belong in this world, and keeping her here puts all of us at risk. The Calabrese family has already made 3 attempts to grab her. How long before they succeed? They won't. You can't watch her every second. You can't protect her and run your organization. She's making you weak. Richard moved so fast Mary barely saw it. One moment Marcus was standing, the next he was against the wall with Richard's hand around his throat. She's not going anywhere, Richard growled. And if anyone, suggests otherwise again, we'll see exactly how weak I've become. He released Marcus, who staggered back, coughing. But Mary had heard enough. She'd seen the looks on the other men's faces. Agreement. Concern. The calculation that she was a liability they couldn't afford. She went back upstairs, got dressed in her own clothes, and called Vincent. I need you to take me home, she said quietly. Mr. Alexander would need to approve. Then don't tell him until I'm gone. Vincent was silent for a long moment. Then, the car will be ready in 5 minutes, Miss Bennet. Mary left a note on Richard's pillow. Just 4 words in Italian. Ti amo. Mi dispiace. I love you. I'm sorry. She made it halfway to her apartment before Richard's car caught up with them. He stormed into her building, past her stammering roommate, and found Mary in her bedroom throwing clothes into a suitcase. What the hell are you doing? He demanded. What I should have done weeks ago. Leaving. Because of what Marcus said? He's an idiot. He's right. Mary turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. I don't belong in your world, Richard. I'm a student. An artist. I can't live surrounded by guns and guards and people who want to kill me to hurt you. So you're just giving up? Running. I'm choosing to live. There's a difference. Mary, please. You can't protect me forever. Eventually, someone will get through. They'll use me to destroy you, or they'll kill me, or, her voice broke. I can't watch you choose between me and everything you've built. I won't be the reason you fall. Richard looked shattered. You're not running from them. You're running from me. I'm running from what being with you will turn me into. Someone who accepts violence as normal. Who looks the other way while people die. I can't. She pressed her hands to her face. I love you, Richard. God help me, I do. But love isn't enough to survive in your world. Then I'll leave it. The words came out desperate, raw. I'll walk away from all of it. For you. You can't. That's not how this works. They'd never let you go. And even if they did, you'd resent me eventually. For making you give up everything. I'd resent losing you more. Mary kissed him then, one last time. Poured everything she felt into it. All the love and grief and impossible hope that things could have been different. Goodbye, Richard, she whispered against his lips. And then she did the hardest thing she'd ever done. She walked away. Mary lasted 5 days without Richard. 5 days of pretending to focus on her senior project while her heart felt like broken glass. 5 days of ignoring his calls, his texts, the flowers that arrived every morning. 5 days of lying to herself that she'd made the right choice. On the 6th day, her mother called. There's a man here, Linda Bennet said without preamble. At the hospital. He says he's a friend of yours. Richard Alexander. Mary's heart stopped. Mom, don't. He's donating $2 million to the pediatric wing. In Nonna Lucia's name. Her mother's voice was shaking. Mary, what's going on? Who is this man? It's complicated. He's in love with you. I can see it on his face when he says your name. Mom. And you're in love with him. I can hear it in your voice. A pause. Baby, I've never asked you to be careful with your heart. Nonna didn't raise us to be careful. She raised us to be brave. Mary's eyes filled with tears. What if being brave gets me killed? What if being scared means you miss the one person you were meant to find? After they hung up, Mary sat in her apartment staring at her unfinished paintings. The portrait of Richard still dominated her easel, those grey eyes that had haunted her since the moment she'd met him. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, gallery opening tonight. 2847 West Chicago Avenue. Your work is being shown. Thought you should know. V. Vincent. Mary's hands shook as she looked up the address. It was a legitimate gallery, One she'd applied to months ago and been rejected from. Why would they suddenly be showing her work? She arrived at 8 p.m. to find the gallery packed with Chicago's art elite. And there, covering an entire wall, were her paintings. The ones from her studio. The portraits exploring masks and hidden identities. Including the one of Richard. Beautiful, aren't they? A woman appeared at her elbow. The gallery owner. A private collector purchased the entire series. Insisted we show them before taking possession. He said the artist deserved to be seen. Who? Mary whispered, though she already knew. His hair actually. Wanted to see people's reactions to your work. Mary turned and found Richard across the room, wearing a dark suit and watching her with those impossible eyes. He didn't approach, just stood there, letting her choose. Around them, people praised her paintings. Critics she'd only read about discussed her use of light and shadow. Gallery owners pressed business cards into her hands, talking about representation and future shows. Richard had given her everything she'd dreamed of. Not with his name or his money, he'd stayed anonymous. He'd simply made sure her talent was seen. Mary crossed the room to him, her heart in her throat. You did this, she said. You did this. I just made sure people were paying attention. He looked at the portrait of himself. You see me better than I see myself. Richard, I'm getting out, he interrupted quietly. Out of the family business. It'll take time, you can't just walk away from what I've built. But I've started the process. Legitimate investments, legal operations. Within a year, I'll be clean. You're doing that for me. I'm doing it for us. For the life we could have if you'll give me another chance. He took her hand, and his was trembling. I don't know how to be normal, Mary. I'll probably always be too controlling, too protective. I'll want to solve your problems with money and intimidation because that's all I know. But I'll learn. If you'll teach me. I walked away from you, Mary whispered. I know. You were protecting yourself. That's smart. He cupped her face. But I'm asking you to be brave instead. Be brave enough to let me love you. To build something beautiful out of all this darkness. Mary thought of Nonna Lucia. Of Richard's mother. Of two women who'd tried to save each other and failed. This was their second chance. The one their mothers never got. Teach me something in Italian, she said softly. Richard smiled, real and warm and devastating. L'amore vince sempre sulla paura. Love always conquers fear, Mary translated. Always, he agreed. And when he kissed her this time, the gallery full of strangers watching her paintings, Mary Bennett chose bravery. She chose love. She chose the terrifying, beautiful possibility of a future with Richard Alexander. The Calabrese family made their move 3 weeks later. Mary was leaving her morning class at the Art Institute when a black van pulled up. 2 men grabbed her before she could scream, dragging her inside. A cloth pressed over her mouth, chemicals sweet, and the world went dark. She woke in a warehouse, hands zip-tied to a chair. Across from her sat an older man in an expensive suit, smoking a cigar. Vincent Calabrese. Richard's oldest rival. Miss Bennett. Finally. His smile was all teeth. Do you know how much trouble you've caused me? Mary's head throbbed. If you're trying to get to Richard, this won't work. We're not together anymore. Please. My sources say he bought out an entire gallery for you. That he's dismantling his empire to play house with a college girl. Vincent leaned forward. You made him weak. Sentimental. And that's going to get him killed. Then why kidnap me? Because Richard Alexander doesn't negotiate. Doesn't compromise. But for you. Vincent's smile widened. For you, he'll walk into an obvious trap. He'll come alone, unarmed, because I told him to. And when he does, I'll kill him and take everything he's built. Mary's heart hammered. He won't come. He's already on his way. The warehouse door opened 20 minutes later. Richard walked in, hands raised, no visible weapons. Alone. Let her go, Vincent, he said calmly. Not how this works. Vincent gestured, and his men trained guns on Richard. You're going to sign over your operations. All of them. Then I'll kill you quickly instead of slowly. The girl goes free. That's the deal. And if I refuse? Then I hurt her until you agree. Your choice. Richard's eyes met Mary's. She saw apology there. Love. Resignation. Don't, she whispered. Richard, don't do this. I told you I'd protect you, he said softly. I meant it. He moved toward Vincent, reaching for the papers being offered. And the warehouse exploded with gunfire. Not from Vincent's men. From the rafters, the shadows, every corner. Richard's people had been there all along, invisible until the moment they weren't. Richard moved like lightning, pulling a gun from an ankle holster and putting himself between Mary and the bullets. The fight lasted 30 seconds. Brutal, efficient, over. When the smoke cleared, Vincent Calabrese was on his knees, surrounded, his men dead or disarmed. You really thought I'd come alone? Richard's voice was ice. That I'd let you threaten her without consequences. You said. I lied. I'm very good at it. Richard pressed his gun to Vincent's temple. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave Chicago. Tonight. You'll dissolve your operations and disappear. Because if I ever see you again, if you ever speak her name again, I won't be this merciful. This is mercy. You're still breathing, aren't you? Vincent was dragged away. Richard holstered his gun and rushed to Mary, cutting her zip ties with shaking hands. Are you hurt? Did they? I'm okay. Mary threw her arms around him. You came for me. Always. I'll always come for you. You said you were getting out of this life. I am. But I'm not out yet. He pulled back to look at her. And until I am, I need you to understand, I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe. Even if it means becoming the monster again. Mary cupped his face. You're not a monster. You're a man trying to be better. That's enough. Is it? For me? Yes. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Richard's people melted into shadows, leaving no evidence they'd been there. He took Mary's hand. We need to go. Can you walk? With you? Anywhere. They left the warehouse together, stepping into the Chicago night. Behind them, the old life, violence and vengeance and blood. Ahead, possibility. The terrifying, beautiful unknown. Richard stopped at the car, turned to her. Marry me. Mary blinked. What? Marry me. Not someday. Soon. Tomorrow, if you'll have me. His eyes were fierce, desperate. I've wasted enough time being afraid. I want to be yours. Completely. Legally. Forever. Richard, that's insane. So was insulting a mafia boss in Italian. You do insane well. Mary laughed through tears. That's your proposal? Reminding me of the stupidest thing I've ever done. It was the bravest thing you've ever done. It gave me you. He went to one knee right there on the dirty street. Mary Bennett, will you marry me? And Mary, who'd always played it safe until the day she hadn't, who'd found love in the most impossible place, who'd chosen bravery over fear. She said yes. They got married 3 days later in a small chapel on the outskirts of the city. No fanfare, no guests except Vincent and James as witnesses. Mary wore a simple white dress from a vintage shop. Richard wore the suit he'd worn the day they met. The priest who married them was old and half-blind and didn't ask questions when Richard handed him an envelope thick with cash. Do you, Richard Alexander, take this woman? I do, Richard interrupted. Yes. Absolutely. The priest blinked. I haven't finished. I don't need you to finish. The answer is yes to everything. In sickness and health, rich or poor, till death. Yes. Mary laughed, tears streaming down her face. You're supposed to wait for the question. I've waited long enough. When the priest finally pronounced them married, Richard kissed her like she was air and he'd been drowning. Like she was the answer to every question he'd never known how to ask. Mrs. Alexander, he whispered against her lips. I'm keeping Bennett professionally, Mary said. For my art. Keep whatever you want. You're still mine. They drove to Richard's house, their house now, as the sun set over Chicago. The city looked different somehow. Softer. Full of possibility instead of danger. In the library where they'd spent so many evenings, Richard had prepared something. The letters from their mothers were displayed in shadow boxes on the wall, a memorial to the friendship that had somehow brought them together across decades and death. I want to honor them, Richard said quietly. Your grandmother tried to save my mother. She failed, but she tried. That matters. They'd be happy, I think, knowing we found each other. Or horrified. Your grandmother probably would have hit me with that wooden spoon you mentioned. Definitely. At least once. Mary touched the glass protecting her grandmother's handwriting. But then she would have fed you. That's how she showed love. Violence and pasta. Richard pulled her close, resting his chin on her head. I'm going to mess this up sometimes. Be too controlling, too protective. Default to solving problems the wrong way. I know. I'll probably check your location obsessively and investigate anyone who looks at you wrong. I'm counting on it. And I'll never be completely legitimate. Some stains don't wash out. Mary toned in his arms, looking up at him. I'm not asking you to be perfect, Richard. I'm asking you to be honest. To choose us over everything else. Can you do that? Every single day, he promised. Her phone rang. How art professor, Dr. Chen. Mary answered on speaker. Mary. I just heard from Gallery Modern. They want to offer you a solo show. 3 months of exhibition space, full marketing support. This is huge. Students don't get opportunities like this. Mary met Richard's eyes. He was smiling, but she could see the question there. Would she accept? Would she step fully into her dream? Tell them yes, she said firmly. Tell them I'll do it. After she hung up, Richard kissed her forehead. You didn't have to. I want this. The art career, the shows, all of it. But I want you too. She cupped his face. I'm not giving up my dreams for you. And you're not giving up your redemption for me. We're doing both. Together. Together, he echoed. They spent their wedding night reading more letters, speaking Italian, planning futures that seemed impossible a month ago. Richard told her about the legitimate businesses he was building, art galleries, actually, inspired by his mother's dream. Mary showed him sketches for her exhibition, nervous and excited. At midnight, they stood at the window overlooking the garden, the city lights sprawling beyond. Do you regret it? Richard asked quietly. Choosing this life? Choosing me? Mary thought about the terrified waitress who'd insulted a mafia boss. About the choice to be brave instead of safe. About how the most beautiful things in life often came wrapped in fear. No, she said. I don't regret it at all. Even though I'm still dangerous. Especially because you're still dangerous. But now you're my dangerous. She smiled up at him. Besides, I'm pretty dangerous myself. I made you fall in love with me. You did. Richard pulled her closer. Completely. Terrifyingly. Irrevocably. Good, Mary whispered. Because you're stuck with me now. Best trap I ever walked into. They kissed as the city hummed around them, a city full of shadows and light, danger and beauty, endings and beginnings. Mary Bennett had walked into a restaurant expecting an ordinary shift and walked out having changed her entire life. She'd embarrassed a mafia boss in Italian, looking straight into his eyes. And he'd done the most unexpected thing imaginable. He'd fallen in love with her. He'd chosen her over his empire. He'd become the man his mother had hoped he'd be. In Richard's arms, surrounded by love letters from the past and dreams for the future, Mary understood what Nonna Lucia had tried to teach her all along. True courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was loving anyway. Choosing anyway. Believing anyway. And sometimes, if you were very brave and very lucky, love really did conquer fear. Always. We have come to the end of the story. Thank you for watching to the end. Share your opinion about this story in the comments below. I like getting feedback from my audience. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our heartwarming stories.